What if you could actually read minds? No, not that way. Better yet, what if you could learn from a working pro with decades of experience to show you what a real mind-reading show should look like? Yeah, that sounds like a good book. Wait, it exists? I better check that out. Let's dig into it. It's not all that often that a new mentalism book comes along and gets my attention, which is why I feel like today's episode is somewhat special. As alluded to in the intro, this is a book from a working pro, someone who's done this for a living for basically their entire career. And while it stops just shy of being a lifetime magic book, it is packed to the brim with practical, performable, and professional mentalism, which is my kind of book. The author, Christopher Carter, is a professional magician. He has his PhD in theater from the University of Michigan, so you know he knows what it takes to put on a great show. And in this book, he's sharing some of his top routines that have earned him a substantial living as a professional mentalist and entertainer. But also along the way, he's going to share some essays and insights into what it takes to become a better performer. Let's talk briefly about the physical characteristics of the book. It is a 230 plus page hardback printed by Penguin Magic here in 2025. Interestingly enough, and I have no further info, it looks like this book has been done for a while. The copyright at the front reads 2023, and yet for one reason or another, it's just now being released in the summer of 2025. Within the interior of the book, you have 9 different sections with 34 different individual pieces laid out on a relatively thick semi-gloss type paper. Each section covers a different theme that Chris wants to share with you. They're all different kinds of mentalism items in here, and I'll say straight off the bat that I don't know that this book is going to offer a lot to a straight-up magician, but if you're looking to try to add more of those mental-flavored routines to your act, this is definitely a great book to help you do that. He's going to cover his approaches to classics like the tossed-out deck, the question and answer act, serial number divinations, drawing duplications, Russian roulette-style routines, billet, business card, and close-up mentalism, and there are many essays throughout dedicated to what he's learned on the subject of performing and presenting effective mentalism. So what do I like about a book like this? Let me start off by saying that I love it when you can feel through the text, through what the author's presenting, that they're a real world performer. And in this case, I not only know that from reading it, but also have a number of friends who know Chris personally and know that he is a professional's professional. Chris makes his living performing both corporate shows and on the college circuit. So he's extremely qualified to tell us what's going to work for just about any type of audience. The other thing that I really liked is that none of this is pipe dreams. This has to work for people who are paying to see a good show. And moreover, it has to work for people who aren't necessarily interested in seeing what you have to present, especially in the case of his college shows. So everything in here is designed to hook your audience, to give them a better experience, and to make you a better performer, to keep your audience engaged for the whole show so that you can get repeat bookings. Okay, so he's a working pro and all this works out, so what? How are the tricks? These are great. And in fact, a number of them I was reading and thinking, I need to put more work into my own act, because when you read through some of these routines, the way he presents them, and the coaching that he gives you along the way, you start to see where your own show needs some work. Lucky for us, Chris has given us not only some great routines that could be injected into your show, but also a blueprint for how to make things more engaging. Of particular interest to me are the specific examples he gives of scripts. He gives you an example of a more mainline and traditional script that you would see from a mentalist, one that I've been guilty of myself, and it reads as you would expect, rather boring. Then he gives you a better example of how you could conduct your piece of mentalism in a far more engaging way, how to milk those interactions and get your audiences plugged in. The other way that his professionalism and the reps that he's put in manifests itself is that these routines have some things that could potentially go wrong in them, and I don't mean that in a way that could mess up the trick. Chris already points out that he doesn't perform things like that, although if you do make a mistake or have an issue, he tells you how to deal with that. But more importantly, he gives you the outs that you're going to need if the trick doesn't go toward the most ideal outcome. In terms of the material itself, you're not going to read a lot of things that are brand new ideas. Many of these are his takes and his work that he's put into classics over the decades of performing experience. He gives due credit to everything, and you're going to read his take in here on pieces from notables like Bob Cassidy, Barry Richardson, Bruce Bernstein, Doug DeMint. If I'm saying these names and you're looking around your library and saying, yeah, you're probably a mentalist, and that's exactly why this type of book is going to be for you. The The mentalist who will get the most out of this book is likely to be someone who already has or is working on a stage show, because from what I can gather, that's where Chris does most of his work. Although there's an important caveat that when he starts on a college campus, he's often booked to do some kind of nooner, as he calls it, or a lunchtime show where the audience isn't coming in to see him. They're there to get lunch, they're there to study, they're there to hang out with friends, and he has to find a way to capture their attention. One of the things that he does is he often walks around and does some close-up mentalism for people to get their interest in what he's trying to do. And he shares a number of those routines in here that you can use for some close-up mentalism, and even some things that use smaller props like billets and how to make those play much, much larger when you're on stage and trying to present something there. Now, if you are a magician and you're thinking about trying to get into some mentalism, I don't know that I recommend this as a first stop. I'd probably go more in the direction of either a Bruce Bernstein or a Barry Richardson, and I've done reviews on all of those books so that you can check those out. I'll drop them down in the description below. But once you're ready to take that next step and become a little more serious about your mentalism, I just think that a book like this is absolute gold for people who want to perform paid shows for appreciative audiences. Let's talk about some of the drawbacks of a book like this, but before we do, let me tell you about the sponsor of this week's episode, Don's Magic and Books. Whether you're that magician, beginning mentalist, or seasoned performer that's looking for books to add to your library to supplement your knowledge on one area or another, shop with confidence at Don's website, knowing that he has all kinds of magic books for every skill level and every budget. Not only that, Don carries both the newest books that you're going to find reviewed here on this channel, as well as older gems that are rarer and potentially out of print. Don has an ever-changing inventory, so you'll want to check his website early and often, and I'm going to drop a link down in the description below so that you can head over there and see what he's got right now. If you see something you want, don't hesitate, because you're likely to find something you want, and you're going to see right away that it is at an incredibly reasonable price with free shipping options. No matter what you're looking for, I hope you'll shop with the sponsor of this week's video, and my friend, Don's Magic and Books. So let's talk about some of the drawbacks of a book like this. Part of it does tie back to my last point there about who this is for, and that is that this is really only going to appeal to mentalists probably, or book collectors who want to have some of everything on their shelves. Because it's mentalism, the book is pretty text heavy. This isn't something that's going to require a lot of sleight of hand. There are definitely presentational skill sets that you're going to need to pull off successful mentalism, and Chris does a good job of coaching you through what some of that is. His oft-repeated mantra in here that mentalism is like radio. And that's a little bit of what the book is like as well. The illustrations that are in here are certainly adequate to learn everything you need, and are drawn by the venerable Tony Dunn. So you know that they're great. Each one of the descriptions is rather meaty, gives you a lot of detail, as I already pointed out. And so while I don't consider that a negative, I want you to be aware that unless you're a dedicated reader, this isn't like some other books that have multiple pictures on every page. The other potential drawback on something like this is the price. I've talked about price before on this show, and I know that it always gets a lot of attention because it's one of the easiest ways that we can measure value, even though everybody defines that a little bit differently. In this case, the book is $80, which I'm not going to say is steep, because these days it feels like it's just about par for the course, but maybe a little bit on the expensive side. Personally, having paid $80 for this book myself, I still feel like it's worth it, and the value is there for me. And if you meet some of the criteria that I already discussed about being a mentalist with a stage show or working on one or something like that. There aren't a lot of frills to this book. The cover, while attractive with the purple curtain and the spotlight, the fonts, is pretty basic. It's not cloth or leather bound. There's no embossing. There's no bookmark. What you see is what you get, but you get a lot of good stuff in here. But ultimately, $80 is still a lot of money. Even though Chris teaches a ton of really great routines and even indicates where some of them go in his show or where he positions them, this isn't the kind of book to help you fill out an entire show telling you here are openers, here are middle pieces, here are closers. You'll kind of infer where he puts them in his act, and you'll also understand in reading through there are pieces that obviously do not go in the same show together. He's pretty clear that he does not do multiple card effects in the same show. However, there are multiples taught in here, so again, if you have any kind of performing experience, you'll understand what fits and what doesn't. But he's not going to hold your hand to help you develop an act. You'll have to look to other sources for that. At the end of the day, I mentioned that this falls just shy of being a lifetime magic book for me. And that's because while Chris has built up a lifetime of performing and is sharing some invaluable experience here, his career, I believe, is far from over. And also, as indicated, he's not exactly a creator. He is a performer. And that makes this book totally different from many of the other mentalism books that you can buy. I feel like the names that I mentioned before, Barry Richardson, Bob Cassidy, Bruce Bernstein, while they're all notable creators and decent performers, I don't believe that any of them made their living by doing mostly paid shows. So if you aspire to do paid shows and want to learn some great routines and thinking from a paid professional, this book has my highest recommendation. If you want to learn more about what I consider to be a true lifetime magic book, then check out this video that I did for you. As always, my friend, appreciate you watching, and until next time, keep reading.